Welcome to Four Sisters and a Brother, the podcast where faith, life, and real conversations come together. Join us each week as we explore topics that matter: faith journeys, life changes, family bonds, and everything in between. We're a lively crew of four sisters and one brother, navigating life with love, laughter, and a whole lot of heart. Whether you're looking for inspiration, practical advice, or just a cozy place to hang out, you're in the right spot. So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's dive in.
Well, welcome to another edition of Four Sisters and a Brother. I'll be leading this discussion today, and I'm Tiffany. So I was on a trip this past week with one of my teams for a conference game, and we had this discussion on the bus. And I brought it up, and I feel like it's very controversial because I actually had it in the office too. So I wanted to get y'all opinion. This is just me. Y'all may think totally different. It was one simple statement or question. Do y'all think Michael Jackson can sing?
Ooh.
He is a great performer, but I just don't think his vocals are just okay. He sounded good when he was little, but I just feel like when he got older, it was like, eh.
I think he's a good performer. I agree. He's a good performer, but if you just have him stand there, not dance and sing a song, I don't know.
Well,
But he has some major hits though. Major hits. Light skin Michael and brown skin Michael.
I mean, I'm not denying that he's like a great, like he does have hits and he can perform and he's like a worldwide pop star, but I just don't think his vocals are like, they're just okay to me. And they jump down my throat.
Well, I think, what do you consider a good vocalist? Like, are we talking about people who can do runs and has range? That's one kind. I don't think you can classify that. He stays on pitch by himself without like auto tuning and the stuff that we have today. But I do think what makes him work is the total package. He can his performances are outstanding. His choreography, his songwriting is amazing. So as far as a vocalist, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say he's probably about a 6.5 or 7. He's not.
Ooh,
he's not like he ain't no Brian McKnight.
He's not a 10. You can't say he's a 10.
See, here's the thing though with Michael Jackson. So much of his life and his performances was a performance. And so he was putting on all of the things at the same time. I want to see or hear Michael Jackson sing a song without trying to entertain us. Just sing it.
That's what I said.
And this is how
what
he
about
sounds,
that song he
because
sings? You and I will never.
He was little. He
little.
wasn't old, like older. So I feel like younger Michael Jackson was a more pure voice than older Michael. I don't know what he did when he got older, but I was told he was classically trained. I just think he's okay, but he's a great performer, songwriter, and he's a pop star.
Again, I feel like when he started getting older, he started perform. Like, I don't think he knew when the performance ended. Like, it just carried on in his life. Like, it was just like, that's how I am now. I'm just this performer man who walks around performing for everything. And that's what I'm like. I need to hear the real Michael Jackson just sing a song. And then I could judge. But unfortunately, we can't do that. So
I think that he has a unique voice, much like a lot of singers back in that day, and then up 70s, 80s, 90s. Certain people have unique voices that make them stand out in their era. So he had a unique voice for him at his era. And I'm gonna bring somebody else's name in there. This guy, he has a unique voice too. But some people say he can't sing, some people can't say he can sing, and that's Keith Sweat.
If you said Keith Sweat, I swear, he cannot sing.
But for the era of time that he was,
I don't know what era that is.
No, he could not sing.
Another person, Mary J. Blige. Mary J.
Okay,
for the time of the era that she was in, her voice was I think it was a pretty decent voice, and I mean,
Early Mary was
Man.
okay. Later Mary, she
Cracked
started
out
sounding
Mary?
a little-
Oh, geez,
Oh.
Candace.
See, I knew I wasn't going to say
She said
that.
earlier, and then
Oh, my bad.
Well, that was
dark,
the
Michael.
that was the debate we had. So if you have comments on this, feel free to put them in the comment box.
But you know who
But-
could still sing, whether they was on drugs or not? Whitney.
No. When she got near the end,
wait.
do you remember when they booed her because she couldn't do
Mhm,
the
mhm.
high
True.
note and I will always love you because she was
But
on the
that
struggle bus.
was on the rough end. She was on drugs in between then. Still sound pretty decent to me.
so did Bobby. So, but go ahead. Tiffany.
Bobby is like
Oh.
zero comparison. Oh my goodness.
Well,
Bring
one
him
thing
up.
that we can all agree upon, old school singers, they usually had their start in the church. Can we agree?
That's
On
so
all the
great.
documentaries. So the subject that I have today is just like the smaller churches versus the mega churches, right? So I did a little research, but for the most part, I just want to get y'all opinions on what y'all think about it. So actually, when you talk about mega churches, biblically, there were no mega churches. There were cities that had, Christianity, when it started to grow, they had big groups of people, big gatherings where Paul spoke to the people, but they actually had, it was more, so they would have gatherings when Paul and stuff would speak. But in the in between, they would have churches in their houses or in the temple that held not as many people. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So you would have, like, when Jesus walked the earth, he talked to 5,000. But, in between there, they could be having church in their houses, in the temple, where there were smaller groups. So it wasn't always all the time that they had large amount of people. And actually, mega churches weren't really introduced until it was like the Protestant Christian church with regular attendance over 2,000 in the mid 20th century. So the phenomenon of mega churches, I'm not going to say that there is super new, but it's not super old either. Okay.
Mhm.
So, and also mega churches as we know it today, they really start taking shape post World War II era. And they gave examples of some of the churches. One church was started in 1920s, and it said it wasn't considered a mega church, but it was one of those churches where they had a building big enough that held so many people. So then I was thinking, I was like, well, how can I define mega church versus a smaller church? And I'm just like, because those numbers could range. So I kind of put them in 3 categories, and y'all can tell me if that's totally off or not. So the categories that I broke this up in are small, medium, and large churches. Now, these aren't exact numbers, but for the sake of this discussion, we're just going to go with those numbers. So I classify a small church. Of course, we have smaller churches that have like less than 100 people, around 100 people. But if you're comparing them to mega churches, it's more, I have it around less than 500. And then medium size will be obviously up to 750. And then I would consider a mega church at least 1,000 members, because most likely they either have a large enough building that can hold a lot of people, or they have multiple campuses, or they have multiple services that all add into their attendance. So we're just going to, go through some questions. I want to get y'all opinion. So because I've heard that, some pastors don't believe in mega churches. They think they're ungodly or whatever. So what are your thoughts on mega churches? Because I've been at a small church. I feel like a small church, and now I'm at what I consider a mega church. So what are your thoughts on mega churches?
Mega churches have shifted in the last few years, or at least the definition from what I was told. A mega church, or even what I've researched and what I've understand it to be is a mega church is anybody who has a consistent weekly attendance of 2,000 or more. So that is considered a mega church. I think the model for a mega church. So when you going back to what you said, well, there was really no mega churches. People did house church. There was a mega church because when I feel like this is me, the way I look at it, when those letters were going to the churches, he never said to the churches in Ephesus. He said to the church of Ephesus or to the church of Corinth. So yes, they might have gathered around in one big mega meeting when Paul came to town, and then maybe they had some house churches or whatever going on. But I think that mirrors more of the model today. Like, think about when we were growing up, mega church, you think Bishop Jakes, and he had an auditorium that seats 25,000, 30,000 people. I think Joel Osteen, where everybody's coming to church at one time and there's thousands of people. But I think the new model for a mega church is basically what we saw in the New Testament. You have one lead pastor, like Stephen Furtick says so, and he has a major campus, but then you have all these breakout smaller campuses everywhere. So I do think that there were mega churches, first of all, in the Bible. And I think the precedent was actually started with Moses, the greatest pastor that ever lived. And I'll get back to that in a minute, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. You carry on.
Well, see, I thought about Moses when we were going to talk about this, but I felt like Moses was leading a nation. I feel like that was a little different than a church. But then again, maybe we should start our definition off of what is church. But even with that, we don't know how many people are in the Church of Ephesus.
It won too.
Like we don't know that it was like 10,000 people. It could have been.
I think we should define church, because are we talking about how many people travel to a building?
I thought church was the actual people.
Or how many people are members.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, they didn't have huge buildings back in the Bible days where it could hold like 10,000 people. They were just gatherings. And then when Paul wasn't like preaching or doing that, they had church or gatherings in smaller areas, like smaller buildings, the temple, people's houses, things like that. So they didn't have like huge buildings that can hold like 10,000 people. You were just outside.
Well, go ahead, Jocelyn.
Well, to answer your original question was, what do you think about a mega church? Is it like good or bad in that sense? And I don't know,
just your thoughts.
Just the thought of it. I don't have any problem with mega churches at all. And I don't understand the whole idea that they're somehow evil or wrong, according to some people. I do feel like I think the perception is that you're able to go to a mega church and have no accountability, because I could just blend in with the people there. I don't have to listen, but that's a heart issue on me. That has nothing to do with the church. They're trying to give you the bread of life. It's still up to you to take it. And just because you go to a small church doesn't mean that there is this accountability. Now you'll do right. That's not true either. So I feel like this discussion, when it comes down to whether it's good or bad, or no, you shouldn't do that because you shouldn't want to blend. Listen, people gonna do what people want to do. End of story. And they're going to do that whether they go to a large church or a big church. They'll just hide it from you when they go to a small church, but they still want to do it. And so this, to me, has more to do with people's individual choices and opinions and convictions and salvation than it does the size of the church that they actually go to or attend. So I don't understand that argument. I have heard that before. Large churches are wrong, or they're bad, or somehow, like, we can't watch you if you go to a larger church. We can't see what you're doing. And I'm like, that's not your job anyway. Your job is to feed me the bread of life. It's still up to me to make the right decisions. Go ahead.
I think that a perception about bigger churches or mega churches is that if you got all those people going there, then they can't be teaching the truth because, I mean, that's a lot of people. They're not teaching all the way something to right now like that because that's a lot of people going there. Um, I think that's a bigger part of it, and that they're not teaching the truth. And smaller churches are, they might not be either, but that's the biggest thing of it.
I think the mega church, it all depends on your leadership. I think you can have a larger church if you're organized and you have things in place to help the church run. I think what you see mainstream mega churches are pastors that, start off and they mean well, I think. And then once they get a little bit of money and a little bit of fame, then stuff starts changing. But I think it depends on the leadership of the church. So if you have a mega pastor who is preaching the truth and he puts people in place, because you can't handle that all by yourself. He puts people in place that can help, pastor the people as well, since he can't do it all himself, then you can be successful. But I think when it comes to mega churches, most of the time, sometimes it's not what's going on. I feel like it's more like how can we keep these people coming back? So now we start doing all this different type of stuff. I think in a larger church, you lose a sense of community. I think smaller churches or medium size or smaller churches, medium size, I don't know what the numbers you just said, I can't remember, but there's a sense of community that people need in church. And when you go to a mega church, sometimes you may think that you're just going there, you're listening to a sermon and you're going home and there's no actual community. But again, that depends on the leadership if they actually have something put in place for their people to then be in community.
And that leads into the next question, but I will say that I don't think there's not a right or wrong answer to mega versus small. It's what you prefer. And I feel like wherever the Lord is, then hey, if it's at a church with 5 people, 6 people, and that's where you feel comfortable at, hey, go ahead. If it's more of, you on one campus and the main campus is somewhere else, and that's where you feel comfortable at and you feel like you're getting fed, then hey. But that's one thing that I wanted to bring up is community. And some people do feel like you have, Leah.
I was gone before you moved on, but go ahead and finish what you were saying because I think what I got to say goes with that too. Go ahead.
Oh, some people do feel like you lose a sense of community at a bigger size church. And like Candace said, I do believe in if you have strong leadership and you have a structure in place. But I think that's at any church. You can be as involved as you want to or not at all. You can go into a small church and not feel community, go in, go for the service, and then go home. I think we all have gotten involved in our churches, so we'll feel a sense of community at whatever church we're at because that's just how we are. We get involved, we do things, we're a part of things. But my next question was going to be like, how do you feel like, so you hear smaller churches, is that community? Do you feel like that's the same in a larger church? But Leah, you could go ahead with your.
I was just going to say, I've had this conversation before. As a matter of fact, I was rebuked, some years ago after having this conversation in the middle of a Sunday school class, because somebody at that particular time, the teacher was basically throwing shade at mega churches and kind of like what Dante said, saying that you can't have a mega church if you're preaching the truth, because if you're preaching the truth, people really don't want it. And so since they don't want the truth, that not that many people are going to be coming and the truth is offensive, da, 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 da. So first of all, I didn't agree with that. And then the other aspect they said was the scripture that talks about how pastors have to give an account for the souls of people who are in their church. And how can you give an account for everybody when there's 30,000? You can't speak to what everybody's doing. So first of all, what's your definition of an account? Are you like going to go to God and tell them everything this person's doing? Because you don't know what they're doing 24/7, number one. So that's when I brought up the pattern of Moses. And somebody said he was leading a nation, or is he leading a church? Well, a church, to me, a church is a set of people with the same shared beliefs, living in the same, or trying to live at least the same kind of life. And so that's literally what the children of Israel were doing. They were coming out of Egypt. They were a group of people with the same beliefs. Moses was the pastor, teaching them how to live out their faith, so to speak, in the wilderness on their way to the promised land. And so when you think about how it got overwhelming for him to pastor so many people, his father-in-law was like, hey, let's break this up into some smaller groups, get you 70 elders, lay hands on them. They have the same spirit as you, and they dealt with smaller groups. And so I think that's when you talk about a sense of community, that's where it comes in, is smaller groups, and that comes with getting involved, like you said. So we have small groups at our church, family groups, what we call them, circles. And so you can get involved in that. But when you get involved in the ministry, whether it's the children's ministry or the worship team, or you're a greeter, or you help with media, that also is a smaller community of accountability. And so I've heard it on both ends. People that are in mega churches that say, I don't want to go there, I'm just another number and nobody really knows my face. But at the same time, I've been in smaller churches my whole life, and I've had people leave and say, well, I just really don't feel connected. And I'm like, well, what do you do? Well, nothing. I'm like, do you serve anywhere? No. Do you help with any of the events? No. But they are angry when you don't jump when they sick, or your kid is having issues, or their kid is having issues, but they've never made. The Bible says he that has friends shows himself friendly. If you don't feel connected, have you been friendly to people? When church is over, even if you don't serve, when church is over, do you stop and talk to the people on your row? At least on your way out the door? Did you stop at the coffee bar and get a coffee with somebody? Or did you tell somebody, at least compliment and say, hey, I like your dress, whatever, and strike up a conversation? Most of the time, these people have not done that. And like somebody said, what you do at a small church is the same thing that you'll do at a larger church. It's all about you and your heart and how anxious and willing you are to connect. It's not the church's job to drag you along. It's your job to get involved.
I definitely agree. Because I don't know if I mentioned what church I attend, but I do attend Elevation, and it's one of the campuses. It's not the campus that he teaches out of. And of course, so we have, Pastor Furtick, who is the main pastor over all the campuses, but then we have campus pastors. And just like I remember when I worked at Purdue and I would have recruits, I said, Purdue will shrink once you get used to going to class and doing all this stuff, because you get into a routine. And I feel like that's the same way with Elevation. Like if you get involved, like we're having an e-teams push actually this week and next, where you can get involved. And once you get involved, you get to learn, you get to know people. You can be a part of an e-group, or you can serve on a team. And that makes the community, like this huge church, it begins to shrink till you have like personal relationships with people, and you have prayer partners and different things like that. And so I do agree, it's all about how much you want to get involved with your church, because we are people who need community. So I think that's one argument people have, is that they're so big that they're just a number. But then, like Leah said, what are you doing to get involved?
I also want to say something. I had to look this scripture up. It's in Matthew 9:37. It says, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. So this kind of creates the mega church platform in the first place. You have all these people out in the world. That's a harvest. Then you got only so many people who are willing to do what Leah said and serve. There are only so many people who are called to the ministry that answer the call. And so now you have situations where you have a mega church being created, but then again, have you been doing what you were supposed to do and fulfill your promise and do what the Lord's asking you to do? I mean, he told you to start putting the building blocks together and the blueprints together to start your own ministry, but yet you said, mm-mm. So your harvest is going to someone else's church. And so you can't get mad at a mega church because there's only so many laborers that's willing to put in the work to do the things that they're supposed to do. And you know, then you have some people who start churches who Lord never said so. And then you have people who the Lord has a call in their life and they're running from it. And so this scripture illustrates how a mega church can even get started in the first place, is positioning in people's heart and where they actually is supposed to be according to their own call. God is calling you and you're saying, mm-mm, mm-mm. And when every time you say, mm-mm, everyone that you were supposed to reach has to go someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so they wind up going to this place or that place, whoever else is willing.
Yeah. The rest of that scripture says, so pray to the Lord of the harvest to send laborers. So for those of y'all who's sitting on your duff, not doing your thing, we've been praying for you to get up. If you don't like mega churches, get in there and start working, like Tiffany said, and shrink that mentality and shrink that visibility. You don't have to just be a number. You don't have to be. If you're a number, it's because you want to be.
I also think that some people may think that smaller churches, somebody may have already said this, but smaller churches may seem more authentic and less performative than a mega church. So what would you all have to say about that?
And that was actually going to be my next question, because they do think that smaller churches are more traditional and pure. And I also think that could be a misconception. We won't say a myth. That could be a misconception that just because you're small, that you're doing everything right and it doesn't seem like a business. I think that there's some small churches that operate, depending on the size, it operates just like a mega church. You'll have pastors, you'll have assistant pastors, they'll still have small groups, they'll still have different things like that. But then there are some that are a little bit more traditional, and
Just
time is not a factor, and you tend to see those on social media just
looking raggedy.
Yes.
Well, I think it goes back to something Dante said originally. He said that, you know, people think that if you go to a larger church, then they're clearly not speaking the truth. And I disagree with that. I think we're in a time in which people are hungering for something and they don't know what it is. And we'll be surprised how much people want to be right, but they know that something's wrong. You know what I mean? I think that's a misconception, that people don't want righteousness. I think they're used to sin. They're used to their feelings. They're used to all these, but I think they just don't know that the thing that they're wanting is Christ. And so I feel like that's not necessarily true. So when people start getting a larger church, like it reminds me of that one church in Atlanta. What's the pastor's name?
2019.
Yes. I mean, if you listen to any of his sermons or even the snippets of what he says, I don't disagree with the man. I kind of feel like he's hitting on the truth in a lot, and his church is growing. How is that possible? It should be going the opposite direction then, if that logic was true. I think we're living in a time in which people are hungering for something. They know something's up. They just don't know what. And that void being filled with truth is what people tend to run to. Now, you can have a small church and it just turned into a cult.
Wow.
Yeah, I said that.
Oh.
You could.
And it does.
It's
Clutch
possible. It's possible.
pearls.
And so we can't sit up here and look at numbers and determine anything. I mean, so having a small church and saying, oh, well, y'all just pure. That's not necessarily true. That means that there could be no oversight over that church, and it could go out of control and go turn into a cult. So the size of the church doesn't matter to me. To me, that's not the question. It's the purity of your heart and your attention and your will towards God, and how much are you submitted to God and how you submitted to Christ.
And then I think it's just common sense on top of that. It's just like, people have with a small family versus people with a larger family. If you have a large family of 8 kids, 2 parents, whatever, your systems for how you run stuff is going to be completely different than a single mom with a single child. They just have that one person to take care of. That's common sense. If you have a large family like the Duggards or something, if you ever watched that show back in the day when it used to come on, the systems that they had to put in place in order for them just to do life every day, the grocery shopping, the who's going to do laundry, who's going to do dishes, who's going to do all this other stuff. And so they had to have a different system because they had a larger amount of people. Same thing with mega churches. If you have a large amount of people, you're going to have some systems in place, or you're not going to have a mega church. It's going to frustrate people, and then they're going to leave, which defeats the purpose, because you want them to come so that they can continue to hear the gospel, continue to be built up in their faith, continue to fellowship, continue to grow in God. That does not mean that if you are a smaller church, you don't need systems, because you do. And that's the issue I think a lot of people sometimes have with smaller churches. And I think it's sometimes the belief system of people with smaller churches. And we don't need all that. We don't need the lights. We don't need screens. We don't need blah, blah, blah. All the things that they feel like are in a mega church. But even if you don't have lights and screens and smoke or whatever, you still need systems. Because you can frustrate somebody just as easily in a small church as you can in a large church. I don't want to go to a small church that's supposed to start at 11:30 on Sunday and you always start at 11:45. I don't want to go to a church where it seems like nothing is planned and everything is just up in the air and y'all just randomly pulling people out the audience to do stuff. I don't want to be at a church that seems like it has no purpose or no end goal for anything. So, right, no mission statement, no whatever. And so you can frustrate people in a mega church or in a small church if you don't have systems. And so, again, I think it all comes down to how much you're willing to connect. And, if you go to one of those small churches that got their cell phone up and they got 2 people in the audience, but they got systems and they love the Lord and they're preaching the gospel, I think you can grow there just like you can at a mega church. But I think that's something to be said for systems. God is a God of order. And I don't care if it's a small church or a large church. He's a God of order.
I totally agree with that. Go ahead, Candace.
I was just going to say systems and the truth. Like, you can't be under leadership that ain't telling you the truth.
Well,
yeah, I think organization is the big thing. And I think that's one of the knocks on bigger churches, because some people feel like bigger churches are ran like a business. But when you have that many people and you have that much offering and tithes and all the different areas and you're out in the community, it's gonna have to be ran like something to run smooth. What are your guys' take on? So I've heard this too, that the spirit can't flow or has a hard time flowing, I guess, for lack of better terms, when you're on like a organized service and order and you have time for different things, and the spirit is kind of stifled when you get to bigger churches because everything is like on a time clock.
I personally think that can get in the way, but at the same time, I don't think you need to be at church for 5 hours. I think God, when he speaks, and you go with the flow, and that can happen in offering, but I don't think it, because we're on a time schedule, but our pastor is also intentional about being discerning about the Holy Spirit and how he's moving. So if he's feel like the Holy Spirit is moving this way, we'll move this way. And it's very like flowy, which I like. And we still get out at a reasonable time. But I know I just don't feel like you have to be there all day to feel the Lord move. Um, yeah, I don't know.
I think that
Definitely.
affects churches that have multiple services more than churches with a single service. If you have a mega church or a large church, but you only have one service, then I feel like you have time to just kind of let God move. But when you have multiple service, that's when the rub comes. Our church had multiple services. We went down to one, and actually we're on the growth spurt again. So we're actually thinking about going back to two services. And I remember one service, it was the early service. The Spirit of the Lord was just moving so strongly. I mean, just so strong. But we had to be done by 9:30 so that that next service could start and people could get out and get in their cars and new people could come in and park. And so I think if you have a spirit-led pastor, they can navigate even those times. So I remember he just kind of gave an altar call, but basically made an announcement. Got off the stage and went into the lobby and basically said, "Hey, the Lord is moving. If you're coming into the sanctuary now for the 10 o'clock service, this is the posture you need to enter in with." And I'm telling you, it's like people left, people came in, but the Spirit of the Lord never broke. And we went right into the second service, and the Spirit of the Lord continued to move. And so I think it can be done if you have somebody who's sensitive. But if you just, yeah, I think that's a hard place to be in.
I think on the flip side, a lot of smaller churches get a rap because they're more, I guess they can be considered more free flowing. And that's where like time comes in with, okay, the service was supposed to be about an hour and a half, and now we're going on 2 hours, 2 hours, 15 minutes. And I think, and I've always said in the past that the one thing that people want to make good use of is their time. So I don't know. I know for our services, the way we adjust if Pastor Furtick preaches a little bit longer, because we have 3 services, one at 9:30, 11:30, 1:30, is when it comes to praise and worship. After the live service, which is the 9:30 service, we adjust our praise and worship and the things that we do in our building to kind of fit that time mold. But sometimes we'll have like altar call and people will come up for prayer, and those things tend to take a little bit longer. But we also have a bigger staff that even with the amount of people coming up for prayer, you still got 10 or 15 people across the front that can pray genuinely for the people. So like Leah said, like you make do with what you have, definitely being led by the Spirit, but everyone still tends to get what they need to get out of the service. So, and then one last final question, but how do your all churches, how are y'all in the community? Do you do community service yearly? Is it something that is emphasized? I know, Candace, you do, what do you call it? Mission trips, different things like that. Because I know that some smaller churches may not have the type of resources that it takes to do some of these things. And like we have a whole website devoted for if we want to do volunteerism. We can sign up for a lot of stuff. But how do your churches, because we're all at different size churches, how do you guys, how are you within the community?
We're pretty big in the community. We have a food pantry. Actually, just talking about this today. So I don't know if it's a partnership or something with Meijer, but every so often, like we can go and buy groceries at Meijer and then also buy like this $10, I don't know what you call it, but Meijer will double that and then give it back to our food pantry. So then we can, feed people. I think they said the numbers. It's like 180 something families a week or something like that they feed through our food pantry. We do missions trips. We just collected an extra offering today just for benevolence. So if people need this in the community, I think at one point in time, it was like assistance, like if you need help with bills, that type of thing. Um, but I think we are more community minded than anything, whether it's in the actual streets of Lafayette or if it's across the seas. We sponsor a lot of missionaries. We help them stay wherever they're at and minister to people in different countries. So I think that our mindset is prayer first, community or people second, or something like that. I should probably know that, but we're very much community minded. People are our priority. That's what it is. People are our priority. People are our priority.
Candace.
Okay. Ours is love God, love others, serve the world. And so that's what we strive to do. I would say that our community service is more financial backing. We did this thing last year where we not sponsored, but featured one of the ministries or community services that we support. So like 1 month was Boys and Girls Club because we donate consistently to Boys and Girls Club. We do Impact, which is a subgroup of Cru, because I live in a college town, so Cru is like, the Christian organization on campus, Christian ministries. And I live in a smaller town, so a lot of the Christians will pool their resources together, and they're the ones that has the the clothing bank and the food bank. So we donate to them to help support them instead of everybody having their own separate things. Some churches still do, but we sow into that. So we haven't done this one in a while. We still support them financially, but we were making lunches for the Muncie Mission, which is a home that help with the homeless population. We do international missions, specifically in Belize, Jamaica, reaching out in India now and getting that part back up and running. It was kind of down because of COVID, and now we're putting those things back into place and doing those. So we are community oriented. We don't do old school outreach like you go in this corner and just holler at people until they come to church. We don't do that, but we do try to make our presence known in the community for every kind of event, especially since our church is a multicultural church. So we're there for everything. We're there for the Juneteenth stuff as well as the 4th of July stuff. We support our community as a whole. So
prayer is our priority. People are our purpose. His presence is our pursuit, and his mission is our passion.
Okay.
It's so bad. It's so bad I had to look that up. I'm so sorry.
Order Pastor Jeff.
I think for us, it's more of a supportive role. We're a really small ministry, so we would be more or less supporting other initiatives that are around the city. I think one things that I can think of right off the top of my head that is annual is our Habitat for Humanity build that we do inter-church partnerships with. So this is other churches across Muncie that we get together with and help out with that and make lunches and build buildings. And if you ever did a Habitat for Humanity house, it's a lot of work, but I've only done so many in my life, but I know that that's the thing that we do. But I think we're more of a supportive role in the other larger initiatives that are around that city at that particular time. So I think that's more of our role as of right now.
Well, I'm pretty new at the church that I'm at now. But what I have experienced, like a little bit over the summertime, they have this apartment complex that they go to, and then they just do something with the kids there, like every week and all. So it might be like getting some pizza, playing some games or something like that, And then at the end of the summer, they had like a big, like almost carnival type deal now, where they had a bunch of prizes you can win and stuff, So it was always a biblical basis behind it and all. But and they knew that there was a church and all, but it was just, it wasn't like overly, hey, I'm preaching to you, come to church thing and all like that. It was just kind of making it more practical. Um, they do other things in the community. I'm not sure just yet because again, I'm pretty new there and all, but always to help out the community. They got a couple of ideas that I don't want to release their ideas right now and all like that, but some of the things coming down the line, it's pretty cool. So I can't stand in front.
And I asked that question because I do think churches should be active in their communities, whether you're big or small. Um, I know I heard some comments on one particular church who, you know, they're on the internet and they have a service where they just give away a lot of money or do different things for people in their community. And it's a knock on them for how they have gone about doing it, whether it's flaunting that, oh, we can, we have this much money or whatever. But I do feel like that's one of the missions for every church. I mean, we just can't keep, the gospel to ourselves. I mean, we got to do something in the community. So and it also shows me in just this conversation that you can be small, you can be big, you can be medium size, you can still have an impact if your church chooses to have an impact in their community.
You also
Uh,
just can't expect people to come to the church. You have to
right.
go to them. Like you can't just be like, come to my church and oh, my church is full now. Like sometimes you have to step outside of your walls and go to them.
Speaking about that, they do have a old school door to door in the neighborhood. Do a little bit of that. They also have on Wednesday night for Bible class. They offer free tutoring for the neighborhood. So any kid, any from grade school, first to 12th grade and all, they got some tutors there that they'll help them for about an hour or so. So any subject and all. So that's pretty cool.
That's good.
And we have quite a few people to come out for that when the weather's nicer now. When it's colder, people ain't really trying to come out like that. But for the most part, students do come. So
With this and with community anything, I feel like you always have to have the right heart and mind to not just do community because it's something you feel like you should do. Like we're a
mhm.
church, so we got to do it. You know, I feel like you have to have the right mentality going into it, or it can become one of these things where you're doing things for show. I wrote this check. Don't you see how big this check is? You look at what we can do for you. You know what I mean? And then it becomes a little, what's the word?
Boasting.
Yeah,
Pharisaical.
yes. It's like I'm doing this for the pleasure
Prideful.
of what I get from it, for the praise that I get from it. So I feel like, anything you do, whether you're a larger church in a mega church and got multiple campuses or a small itty bitty church, doing the best you can. I feel like you have to have the right heart in mind when you're going to go out into the community because people feel that. They feel whether you're trying to be genuine and you actually care for their soul, or you just doing this because this makes a good picture on the brochure of trying to get you to come to our church. You know, people feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do feel like whenever you're talking about the community, sometimes, and I like that, they have free tutoring for the kids. Sometimes you have to meet the people's physical need. I don't know how many,
Mhm.
um, I feel like Pastor Furtick preached on that at one point, but sometimes it's meeting their physical need before they even think about anything else. Like, because, we're in a community where people are struggling. The cost of living here is not cheap, and people are struggling, and now with all these changes and things like that, sometimes they just need help before they can think about anything else. And I know I'm part of the welcome team, and we have people who come to our tables, and they're just like, can I talk to somebody because I need X, Y, and Z? Well, absolutely, let me find a staff member and get you connected, because sometimes that's the first step. um, even when we're not out in the community and they come to us. Sometimes they need stuff. And, there'll always be people who take advantage. You can't help that, but you can always do your part. So anyone have any further comments? It's been a great discussion. Yes.
I do. I think one of the things in this discussion, and I think, the Lord is moving in a very mighty way in the church. And one of the things I think he's doing is restoring the reputation of the church, especially when it comes to mega pastors. I was standing in line in Walgreens, and there's a I used to have the magazine rack, and it wasn't the Inquirer, it was some other one, but it was like, look at these pastors, and they had Bishop Jakes, Creflo Dollar, they had a couple other pastors on there, and they're going on and on about, are they men, the winning souls, or are they con artists? So I think one of the negatives about a mega church is people assume that because you're in a mega church that you're taking all the money and the pastor's living in this $1 million mansion. It has 2 or 3 all over the world, and all these cars and jets and planes and all of this stuff. And I do think in some ways we have gotten out of balance with that. In some ministries, it is a con. But I think, and so unfortunately, what that does is it shades the entire church, small churches and mega churches alike. But I think one of the things the Lord is doing is restoring that reputation. So when you see people like Pastor Anthony Mitchell preaching an unadulterated truth, the way he preaches it, and his church is blowing up, but he wants nothing but glory to go to God. I mean, even down to his dress. I wear black. He says, I wear black because it reminds me that I am dead to myself. I am only living out what God wants me to live out. And so I think there are going to be more of those kinds of preachers coming on the scene, and those kinds of mega churches now representing the body of Christ versus what we have seen in the past with I need you to give a $50,000 offering so I can, get my jet going or whatever. You know what? And I think to a certain extent, we do need resources in the church and that kind of stuff. But I think God is restoring the church's reputation when it comes to mega ministries, and more of the 2819-ish type churches are going to start coming up in the future, I believe, because that's just what God is doing. So,
and I don't think it's going to look the same either. Like we're used to traditional whatever. I don't think it's going to look the same, and it's definitely not going to have the same looking type people in there either. So, well, this has been a great discussion. Thank you all for tuning in. This is another episode of Four Sisters and a Brother. Please feel free to leave a comment on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or our YouTube channel. And we will see you next time.